back to the But Thank God podcast. I have Lillian here. Lily, what's up?
Nothing much. Just, another day in the life.
So Lily, right? Thank you for being here. It's like my favorite thing in the world to have the people that I love on my podcast because it's all about, community.
I love to be here because, I get to speak to, the peeps.
To the peeps.
Yeah.
I like them.
Yeah. So, what do we want to start with?
So, there's so many topics that I feel that we were talking about earlier, and something that really stood out to me is talking about the topic of rejection.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that it's like really hard. It's
a
vulnerable
hard
topic to talk about, but I think it's important for us to just bring it to the forefront because so many of us struggle with that in different aspects of our life. And I want to hear from you first. Okay. I think I could just talk forever on this, but I want to hear, you're my guest on this, so I want to hear what God spoke to you on about rejection. Like, why does that hit you?
Rejection is not always negative. Good things can come out of rejection. That's a great
thought right there. That right there is a nugget that many people don't want to accept. They don't take it to that level. They see just the pessimistic side of it, like, oh, woe is me. I'm the victim. I'm rejected. But it's like, we thrive. Okay, so as Christian women of faith, we thrive to have God's will aligned with our life. Yeah. Not our life aligned with God's will. So the things that we want are not the things that God wants for us sometimes. And so saying, oh yeah, like, hey, like this guy didn't want you. I'm sorry that your emotions are attached to
and
that.
And I feel like with that too, like you could look at it in a perspective of, maybe God is telling me that this guy is not good for me. Maybe God is telling me that, he's protecting your heart, because that's what God does. He, wants to protect your heart.
I think it goes back to also the foundation of love.
Yeah.
We experience love the first time in the womb.
Yeah.
And then you experience love outside the womb. And then as you're growing and all these things happen, but the foundation of like rejection and love, they kind of coincide with each other. And so it's like I feel rejected because I wasn't loved in this area. Or
right.
I feel rejected because I wasn't seen or I wasn't heard, and all these things.
I feel like another thing is another important thing that I feel like we can touch on in rejection is being rejected by their families. Mm-hmm. In the aspect of, some people don't have moms and some people don't have dads, and that like sprouts a really big rejection, especially when it happens earlier on in life.
There's no uniform way of living. There's no rhythm in your life where it's like, oh, I see love. I totally get that. So my husband and I, Bruce, that's my man right there.
Mr. Bruce.
Mm-hmm. Bruce. Okay, love him. And anyways, shout him out almost on every single podcast.
You shout really my husband
out. I am not even lying to anybody in this room. Okay, so we're like sitting there and we're exchanging just like an intimate moment. We're just like loving each other, kissing, hugging, whatever.
Those are the best.
They are really good moments.
Just sit there and talk.
But let me tell you what, my kids do not feel that way. So we have littles in the house, and so we're sitting there, we're having this moment, and Bruce like gives me a kiss, and he stops, and then he comes back and gives me another kiss, and I'm like, what are you doing? But he starts laughing hysterically. I'm like, what is going on? And he says to get to the point where we're talking about love and rejection. This is really, really interesting. My son Jasper was sitting there watching us, and he was laughing because Jasper's face was like, ew, like I'm gonna ew, mom. But Bruce stopped in that moment and said, man, I want my kids to know that mom and dad love each other, and that's the foundation that we're building our home on.
In the aspect, my parents are separated, but that's not gonna stop me from eventually, like getting married one day and having a home where, our home is centered around love. And that's not to say that, my home with my mom or with my dad is not centered around love. It is. My parents love me. They just, didn't work out in the end. But, for me, I feel like when I do get married, I want that marriage to be, very strong and like centered with God, because I feel like nowadays people take marriage as something that it's not.
It's just a piece of paper, or I don't want to get married because I'm locked down. Like, no, there's so much more to that.
There's so much more to marriage.
I lived that life.
Yeah.
I was that girl.
She's the living.
I was the one. And then God met me in a really cool way, which was just when you ask God for wisdom, he will give you wisdom. When you ask God for clarity in any area of your life, he will give you the clarity. Nice. And God straight up showed me with so much love and grace what marriage is about.
On that. I don't know if like you can relate to this, or anybody like on live or listening can relate to this, but I feel like God recently has given me a lot of like view and discernment about the people in my life.
That's good.
Yeah.
Like community or
no,
friends?
Like honestly, like anybody around me. Like God has really just given me the discernment to be like, you know, these people probably aren't good for you and good for, you know, your relationship with me, and you need to cut ties with them. And I feel like that's something a lot of people my age, especially, you know, with girls, struggle with is, you know, when they know friendships and relationships are not good for them, they won't cut them off.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, now I can see that, you know, God is giving me that strength and that will to, you know, like, let these people go out of my life so I can have a closer relationship with them.
What would you say to somebody to encourage them to step away from a community that's not good for them? Like friends in high school and stuff.
I would say sit with themselves and sit in silence. I believe that silence is a really important thing in your faith, and to just be able to sit in silence with God and, you know, ask him, you know, are these people supposed to be in my life?
What are the characteristics that you're like, okay, this is what I want to surround myself with? Like, these are the people, this is their heart or their passions, or what is it?
I feel like genuinely I need to find more friends that are, you know, in tune with their faith, for sure. When you hang out with worldly people, at the end of the day, if you're not a worldly person, you're just going to feel alone. And that's another sign to be like, hey, maybe I need, you know, a new group of friends. And I feel like the biggest thing I want to encourage people is, if you have that feeling that the Lord is giving you to cut somebody off, do it. Don't hesitate.
There's that encouragement. Just take the step, walk in obedience.
For sure.
God's blessings come from the obedience. And so that's so good. We are called to be the salt and the light of the world, right? And so we're supposed to preserve the kingdom and just go out and just spread the love of Jesus, right, to everybody. Now, there are times when there are times when we drastically fail. What areas of your life do you feel that God has picked and pruned and brought to the surface, right? And refined you in different areas where you're like, wow, I was this, but now I'm this.
You know, I'm open about talking about my faith. I love to talk about my relationship with God and my faith. Recently, I have been, you know, really praying on something, you know, in my family, you know, recently, like, you know, my dad, you know, like, has always had faith, but it's not always been, like, the strongest. And, you know, I've been, like, asking him to go to church. You know, I invite him. I'm like, you're always welcome to come with me. And he had called me today, actually, like, a couple hours before I came here when I was in school today. And he was, like, talking about, like, everything going on in his life right now and, like, whatever. And he had been, like, you know, I really think I need to start going back to church. And I was like, wow.
Look
like,
at you planting
like,
seeds.
I know. Like, God really, like, moved in that for me. And I feel like genuinely, as a daughter, I feel like I'm doing good. And as an older sister, I feel like, you know, I'm trying to plant those seeds, and they're planting. I just don't think they're entirely ready to bloom yet, if you know what I mean.
Which is good. That's a good point that you brought up, is that, see, the thing is that God calls us to plant the seeds.
Right. He
hasn't called us to be the one who provides the sunlight and the water.
Yeah.
And he's called us to plant seeds.
Just
God is going to do the work in that. Like, you can consistently saying, hey, Dad, I want you to come to church with me. I would love to see you there. Or, you know, don't worry, like, God's got you. That's a little, every time it's a little seed, you shining the light in that area. And then for him to call you and say, wow, I really think it's time.
Yeah, no.
That's God doing the work.
God
that's
moving,
all God. Like, you got to give him all the glory for that, because that's ministry right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm just so excited for you.
And then something I wanted to, like, ask you and I guess, like, discuss between us is because, you know, my testimony with, you know, the Lord is primarily based off, you know, past, you know, mental health illnesses. So, like, what would you say to somebody that's really suffering with, like, anxiety, depression, you know, maybe, like, PTSD from, you know, verbal or physical abuse? Like, what would you say to them to be faith-driven? Like, take those things to the Lord.
So we should start back at the topic of anxiety.
Yeah.
You need to go back to the
root
issue, right?
Issue.
So you're dealing with anxiety. What is the meaning of anxiety? Anxiety is the fear of not knowing what's coming. But when you get back to that root of understanding what anxiety is, to encourage somebody to say, okay, how do I walk in faith in that? and saying like, okay, how am I going to overcome this? You have to say, man, I'm struggling in this area and I have to give it to the Lord. But it comes down to realizing and remembering that God commands us not to worry about tomorrow.
Right.
He tells us to worry about today because it has its own troubles. Yeah. But God is not a God of fear.
No.
He's not a God of confusion. He's not a God of chaos or
any
of those things.
He's always
the same yesterday, today, and forever. He will always be that. So if you don't understand the character of God, then you won't understand how to defeat anxiety.
I feel like I truly did not know the characteristic of God until recently. Like
that's good. Yep.
Last Sunday I was at the inland. I was in the book of Mark.
Good book.
And I was reading about the woman that was really sick with the bleeding, and how God had come through the city that day, and there was so many people around him and whatever. And I was reading, and it just really like warmed my heart to see like the true characteristic of Jesus.
What's the word? Compassionate. That's who he was.
Yes.
Like we learned in group that compassion was the first characteristic that was ever shown in the Bible, that was ever given to us.
He didn't shame her for touching his garment either. He was totally like,
what would Jesus do? He would love you.
Yeah. He totally was like, like, you're my daughter. Like, I'm glad that you're healed.
I do have to say that God can meet us exactly where we are in an instant.
Yeah.
And he can change our hearts in an instant.
Posture, yeah.
So,
and he has before. I've gone to church.
He's done it for me
I've gone to church some days, and you can even like Katie can even like quote me on this. I've gone to church some days. Like,
we praise in Jesus.
Like, I've gone to church some days and walked in and been in a totally incomplete heart posture. I've been angry. I've been upset. I've been, I've been mentally exhausted to the point where I'm like, Katie, like, I don't even think I can be here today. Like, I really think I just need to go home and go to sleep. And Katie's like, just stay, just, like, pray on it, just, ask God to change your heart posture. And I feel like that's really important because he always does. Like, all I have to do is just, like, sit there in silence and just ask him, like, to just change my heart posture.
Something that I heard at church on Sunday, he said that he had a friend who had passed away. He imagines his friend in heaven, and he's sitting there, and he's being greeted by, let's say, Moses, and he's like, man, yo, Moses, how was it? Like, how was it having God, like, being in the presence of God? They're like, yeah, it was great. It was absolutely awesome. Yeah, God was with us, but what was it like to have God in you?
Yeah.
And I was like,
it doesn't get better than
all
that.
The nuggets, drop the mic. That's it. That's done. That was a transformational moment for me. Like, I had knowledge, but now I have the revelation. Yeah. I have like a completely different viewpoint of what it's like to have God inside of me. And like, I want to live and represent. And I have something that people back in that time that never had. Like, it's all because I put faith in Jesus. I believed in who he is and believe in the death and resurrection of Jesus. And because of that, the Holy Spirit with all those amazing gifts, joy, love, peace, patience, kindness, self-control, all the things, gentleness, all the things that I need to be a woman, a wife, a friend, a mom, a coworker, all of these traits that I need and to represent God well lives inside of me.
Yeah.
And I can you're like, oh, I can just ask him to change my heart posture. Yeah. Literally, he's inside of you. He's already doing the work. Yeah. And so it's like, it's that easy. And that's where it's just,
and I feel like just to close out, like, I just have one more really important thing to say, and then we can,
drop it. I think you should close it out for sure.
I feel like with the whole God living inside of us, I can say that at the end of the day, like, when people, are, shunning me away because I do have this belief in the Lord, and, I'm stronghold to the things that I want to do, like, saving myself for marriage. That's a really big stronghold for me, and I know that I'm gonna do it. Like, no one's gonna stop me or change my heart posture. And I genuinely feel like, at the end of the day, everybody could shun me away and never speak to me again. And I feel like at the end of the day, I have the Lord in me, so I'm good. I'm full.
That's it right there. Dab it up. That's it right there.
I'm full.
I can't say thank you enough for taking the time to come and to just have a conversation with me. You are
I'm a busy gal.
Yes, you are a senior, cheerleader, captain, all the fun things. And you got a boyfriend who takes away all of the time that I need with you. But I love him so much too. So shout out to you. You know who you are. So thankful that you're here. I love you. I'm so excited for what God has for you in your future. I just see big things happening for you. So we will be dropping this episode will probably be on 3 different platforms.
3 different platforms.
Three different podcast platforms. So, but thank God, Young in Faith and
Grow in Him.
Yeah. You guys, don't forget to check the link below. All the links will be below. Descriptions, you'll have time lapse, all those things. Your time is valuable, so we want to make sure you get what you need out of this. We're excited that you're here. Thanks, and can't wait. We'll see you next time for sure. Bye. Stay blessed. Bye. So good.
Yes, Sirski.